Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Let's Get Court-Martialed, written by Bam Chef. You are not to respond or act in distress calls out of the Nevin system. You are to maintain strict radio silence. This order repeated over and over in Eric's head as he scrambled through the tight corridors of the UNSC-DD 6482-0 Observer. They were stationed directly outside of the Nevin system to observe and record the ongoing rebellion and overthrow of the Nevin nobility. They deserved it, all of it. Rampant slavery despite being outlawed by the Galactic Republic, oppression and starvation of anyone below the rank of Count, unchecked piracy in and outside their borders from anyone that can get their hands on a spacefaring vessel. Most of those were little more than tin cans held together with scraps and welds that made first-day apprentices look like masters at their craft. Despite that, Eric couldn't tune out this particular distress call. It was coming from just inside the borders from a decadent pleasure yacht, Princess of the Void, that was currently surrounded by over 100 of the crappy pirate vessels and in the process of being boarded. This is Yacht Princess of the Void. We beg for assistance from any and all responding friendly vessels. First Princess Thamina, 16 cycles old. Fifth Prince Rishtal, 12 cycles old. And Third Princess Ni, 5 cycles old, are attempting to flee the ongoing revolution in the Nevin system. They are innocent in the atrocities committed by the nobility. Speaking as High Admiral of the Royal Fleet Grinds of the House Vesna, currently commanding 28 of the Royal Special Forces loyal to me in an attempt to get those innocent children out of the system. As Eric reached the bridge of the Observer, he pulled himself into the captain's chair and was going over the systems when a new message came in. Admiral Granz was sounding panicked now. Come on, you human bastards, I know you're listening. I am of high enough rank for you to save face with my execution, and he saved those innocent children. Behind him the fighting was audible. Coming, you sly fox, muttered Eric as he strapped himself into the seat and started the main reactor up. The Observer was technically classified as a self-destroyer in the UN fleet, and the only thing bumping it up into that category was a stationary 60mm autocannon on the bow and a non-reloadable missile bay with 4 Geronimo anti-ship missiles. The rest of the ship was built entirely for stealth and observing people. There was no armor, no grab system, no inertia dampeners, or any other of the conveniences for any other ship, UN or not. Just 5 UNSF personnel cramped into a small tin can with optical and sensory camouflage, packed full of spy equipment, and with 2 highly outdated alibi weapons to call it a destroyer. The Observer didn't even have heaters. Jesse was calling Eric over the intercom when the reactor was firing up. "What's the plan, boss man?" Eric smiled. Jesse heard the same transmissions he heard, and Eric knew that Larissa and Ben would be on board to rescue without their obligatory veto to any decision that was being made. "Let's get us all court-martialed," Eric responded with a grin. "Geronimo missiles active," the weapons CO Larissa called. "Engines nominal," Engineer Ben called. "Camo will not be able to hold. Ready to drop out, divert power to the rest of the ship," Jesse grinned from next to Eric. "You know, I am technically captain of this vessel, right?" General Tina spoke calmly, getting the aye, captain from all of them in return. "Just making sure, Eric." "Yes, man. Don't miss those sons of bitches." "Wouldn't dream of it, ma'am." "Perfect. Everyone not needed to apply this tin can, gear up for counterboarding. Non-lethal setup, and make sure the kids are okay." Eric engaged the engines and held the throttle in one hand. "Drop, drop, drop," he called to Jesse, and he dropped the camouflage and diverted power to engines at the same time. Eric shoved the throttle to max. All of them were being shoved back into their seats as the Observer lurched forward, dropping out its camouflage around the moon of Nevin Prime and beelining it to Princess of the Void. "And you thought it a good idea to disregard direct and clear orders of the UN military and engage revolutionaries on board the Princess of the Void because there were children on board?" Tina stood and looked at the military judge without a singular emotion on her face. "Sir, it was a judgment of the moment. If we would have not intervened, then the princesses and prince of Nevin system would have been wiped out, paraded through the streets and pikes like all the other nobility. I couldn't, in good conscience, let those kids be killed and defiled this way. If you want to judge and punish me for that, I am ready and willing to serve any punishment you deem necessary. But I will sleep soundly at night, knowing I did the right thing. as did any of my officers, which followed my orders through the ordeal, and thus should not be punished. You do understand that we have full transcripts of the black box from your ship, General? Yes, sir, I do understand. I also understand that, as a commanding officer, it was my duty and responsibility to stop First Lieutenant Eric. My unwillingness to do so makes me, and only me, fully responsible. You also understand that this argument is vile. First Lieutenant Eric isn't here today to defend himself. If I recall correctly from the transcript, they capped a fucking destroyer. I take care of it. Were his last words, before he rammed the destroyer the revolutionaries had captured, destroying a $4 billion asset, revealing a planetary secret to allies and foes alike, and conveniently escaping judgment. That is correct, sir. In the name of the people of the United Nations and its military, General Tina McAllister is hereby demoted to lieutenant and relieved of her duties. Furthermore, she is to be honorably discharged from the UN military with all further employment into military or military contractors to be blocked. Her file is to be sealed and her involvement in the Observer program to be erased. Sergeant Jesse Juan is to be demoted to private first class and honorably discharged from the UN military, with all further employment into the military or military contractors to be blocked. His file is to be sealed and his involvement in the Observer program to be erased. Sergeant Major Benedict Michaels is to be demoted to Sergeant First Class and to be honorably discharged from the UN military, with all further employment in the military or military contractors to be blocked. His file to be sealed and his involvement in the Observer program to be erased. Lieutenant Colonel Larissa Scherer to be demoted to First Lieutenant and to be honorably discharged from the UN military, with all further employment into the military or military contractors to be blocked. Her file is to be sealed and her involvement in the Observer program be erased. First Lieutenant Eric Scherer is to be posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. His file is to be sealed and his involvement in the Observer program to be erased. Court is adjourned. That is all I can do for you, saving those kids, Tina. Tina nodded with a slight smile on her lips. Thank you, General. End of story. Story number 2. A Kind Curse, written by Echoing Cascade. Salai had not started out as a witch. She was once a proud goblin shaman, a healer for her clan. She had followed war chief after war chief into battle, saving those she could, comforting those she couldn't. Each one would make the same claims. It was the only way. We must make war to achieve peace. It wasn't until the 2nd century that she realized that in the name of peace she had known nothing but war. Something broke in her. She, who hadn't smiled in decades, began to laugh maniacally. She left her clan, abandoned her calling as a healer, and focused her not so insignificant powers into something new. Curses. She became a feared witch, her name whispered with horror by those who had seen her handiwork. So great was her renown that nobles paid her a monthly stipend to remain in her good graces. Her fame reached the point that the kingdom itself was on the verge of becoming her enemy. She left her tower without second thought, moving to a faraway land in a human city, where she set up a small shop. There she sold cursed items to anyone who had the coin. Today, a young peasant was asking for a cursed necklace. Are you sure? Yes, the wearer of the necklace will die in 7 days. The child's face lit up before leaving the shop, waving Salai goodbye. Thank you, Miss Witch. She was curious. She had sold items to people, aiming to inflict horrors on lovers, parents, neighbors, and sometimes perfect strangers. No matter the target, the buyer always had something in common. Their eyes reflected hate, greed, lust, etc. A sin so great that it would stain their soul whether they succeeded or not. But the child seemed genuinely thankful. She had to know what this vile little creature wanted to do with the necklace, who he hated so as to be happy to kill them. She followed him to a small house in the outskirts of the city and looked through the window as the child spoke with the priest, a human healer. She didn't hear the whole conversation, but she did catch one thing. She won't make it through the night. She then saw the kid enter his mother's room, gently lift her head, put the necklace on her neck, kneel by the bed, put her hand on his face and pray, not for a miracle, just for 7 more days. Before this night, Salai didn't know she could still feel for others, but as profound sense of sadness and guilt overwhelmed her, she decided to do something she hadn't in centuries. She casted an invisibility spell and went to check on the patient. The woman was dying, that much she already knew. The damage was caused by growths in her lungs, something healing spells had no effect on, since they were created by the body itself and not some form of wound. If I had continued my studies, maybe I might be able to do something. She had given up on healing, and as the sands at times ran out on this mother, loved by her son, she recalled other ways to mend a body. She cast a stasis field on the mother, grabbed a lock of her hair, and walked out the door. Salai waited for midnight at a nearby crossroad after having buried a small box with a lock of hair, and she didn't so much as flinch as a creature appeared from the shadows to stand in front of her. "Salai, my dear, what can I do for you this lovely evening?" "I have a target for you. I'm calling in a favor." Of course. You've sent so many our way. It is the least we could do for you." Salai gave the demon a piece of parchment and a handful of copper coins. "Go to the owner of the hair, heal her, make her strong and healthy again, and leave these coins and parchment by the nightstand." The demon looked confused for a second before it remembered who he was talking to. She has a plan. She always does. I almost pity the human woman. "Very well, until next time." As he faded, the demon missed Salai's whispered words. There will be no next time. Jake woke up, still kneeling at his mother's bed, and had a moment of panic. "Where?" Then the smell of porridge from the kitchen answered his question. "I made some food. You hungry?" Jake cried as he rushed to hug his mother. He could barely see her through streaming eyes, but as he saw the necklace, he began to cry for a different reason. 7 days. "It's okay, little one. I was very sick, but now I feel better than ever. It's going to be fine." Jake nodded and forced a smile. Then his mom insisted he wash before breakfast. While passing in front of the bedroom, he noticed a glint of coins. 8 copper coins laid on top of parchment. He picked it up, and the words transcribed on it flowed into his mind. The item sold was not in fact a cursed necklace, but a greater restoration item, single use. Here is your reimbursement in full. We apologize for the inconvenience. Jake fell to his knees and cried his eyes out, clutching the coins in his hand until they drew blood. The cursed shop disappeared without a trace, and no one ever saw the witch again, though on battlefields all over the continent, soldiers would speak of a goblin healer, who, without word, would pry men from the jaws of death, ask for nothing in return, and disappear with a warm smile on her face. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.